O'Reilly. You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
As you know, the Meat Eater Live Tour is on April 23rd through May 5th. Chances are in a town near you. What you may not know is you can win tickets to each of these events just by going to a backcountry hunters and anglers pint night. There's going to be a pint night in each of these towns: San Diego, Salt Lake City, Tempe, Anaheim, Boise, Sacramento, Missoula, Portland, Tacoma, where you can compete in Meat Eater trivia and win not only tickets to the show, but a chance to be on stage with all of us. So get your butt to a pint night, and we'll see you on stage.
I guess I grew up on an older road.
The engineer say, "What's up, Phil?"
Hello, this is Phil T.
Phil, I'm on it today, buddy. I'm fired up.
Oh, 2 yerba mates this morning, Ben?
Yeah, 1.5. Feeling the juice. Is this something you think people make fun of me that I drink this? What's this shit called? Yerba mate? Goyaki yerba mate?
I mean, I can only speak for people I know, and the answer is yes. That's all we talk about.
Yes.
We just make fun of you.
Exactly. All right, well, we're going to move on from that because I am a very fragile ego. We got a lot of things to cover on the show today. I'm excited about all the emails that we got from you. I'm excited about some of the conversations we're going to have. I will admit to part of today's podcast being a bit self-indulgent, overtly political. There's some stuff I want to say, some stuff I've been inspired to say by one of my favorite writers. So we're gonna go over that here with our buddy Miles Nolte, the director of fishing, one of the hosts of Bent podcast, but also one of my favorite people to politely argue about politics with, respectfully argue about politics with. So something we're gonna cover. This is coming out. I think this is coming out Tuesday. So this will be right after inauguration. On inauguration. What's the?
Yeah, it'll be the day before.
The day before. So this it'll be given. There'll be some heightened sense politically. Something I think that hopefully you guys will like to hear. Before we get to that, on myself.
I bet.
Eric's got his own reasoning. He said, "Why emergent? First, it's technically correct. Emergent is defined as coming into view or notice, issuing, rising from a surrounding medium." Coming into existence, rising casually or unexpectedly, as we just said. Those of us who chose to come to hunting emerged from an ordinary life into a life of hunting. Second, and more importantly, it sounds badass. When you hear something like emergent technology, you think, damn, that's going to be some cool shit coming down the pipeline. It's the same for us emergent hunters. He said, I've been working on an article on this topic, but I'll share a few thoughts about emergent hunters and why they're badasses. We aren't part of the tradition or patrilineal descent. We aren't conscripts to the cause. We're volunteers. We chose hunting. While most hunters learned through osmosis as kids, we had to piece together all the myriad of skills it takes to hunt as adults. And when you think about it, the amount of knowledge and skills you need to be competent to hunt is pretty damn overwhelming. He said he started hunting around 8 years ago. He's from Los Angeles. Grew up as an Eagle Scout, and then got into hunting, and is now cranking. and now calls himself a hunter, not an emergent hunter. So maybe there's some sort of a graduation process we can put it in. He also says, P.S. Just want to give a shout out to Phil to give him some confidence. I too love video games and Star Wars and stuff, and I have a wife and 2 young kids, but I am also a hunter. He can do it too. Plus, hopefully he'll get to kill a turkey, which I still haven't done. So there you go. Phil, thoughts? Emergent hunting. That was a pretty good. I mean, I couldn't have put it better myself in terms of emergent hunting.
That was an eloquent statement there. I like it a lot, Ben. I'd say the one thing that kind of made me chuckle was that he was like, "You're emerging from your previous life as if somehow you're being reborn."
Yes,
or you're waking up for the first time.
Yeah, you're a caterpillar.
You've been red pilled, bro.
You're a caterpillar. You're merging into a butterfly as a hunter. I like that he takes it that seriously, man. I like that he's thinking of this stuff as really a life-changing deal, which I do believe it is. So I'm going to go with it, man. I'm going to go with emergent hunters. We are gonna penalize anyone that says adult onset hunters. We will cancel you if you bring that to this table. You'll be canceled. Yeah, cancel culture. So we're going to go with it. So thanks, Eric. Really appreciate that, man. And if you write that article, let us know. We may share it with the folks. He's also lives in California. He's a board member of the California chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. So he's not just writing about it and talking about it. He's doing something about it, which I can respect all the way around. To this idea of new hunters, this being the year of the new hunter, I liked giving everyone an idea of something they could step into that's a little bit more important than just something you do on the weekends. So do you feel that, Phil? You feel like it's going to change your life?
To be honest, no. I mean, I think the experience of going out and taking a life and harvesting the meat and consuming it. I mean, that in and of itself is, I think, yeah. I mean, that's a life event. That's a life-changing experience. I don't see it changing the way I live day to day or stuff I think about. I mean, I think it will be like an occasional weekend activity. That's how I'm seeing it.
Somewhere out there, Eric Hall is turning over in his truck, driving to work.
Turning over in his truck.
So, Eric said to all you emergent hunters out there, Phil included, you are badasses and be proud of it. So be proud of it. Don't be ashamed. Not that you would either way. Okay. So the next email we got, I would again say, I want to do this when I can. The THC inbox, after almost 2.5 years of doing this, is still hopping. So I'm assuming that means you guys are still loving what you hear. If you are, give us a review. Give us the 5 stars. Write a review of the show. Do all that stuff. But you know what gives me the most satisfaction is reading these emails. And now this one comes in from Zach. And man, it's a long one, but it's important, I think. And Phil, can you put on your Dr. Phil hat? This one, we got to help this man solve a problem.
Yep, it's on. There it is. How does it look?
Oh, wow. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So Zach says, I have been listening to THC religiously since the summer, but this is my first time writing in. I started to listen to this podcast as an intern for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Park while driving for hours on end, mapping fences, and I was drawn into the philosophical conversations about the outdoors and our food system. This podcast is truly one for people who think about hunting deeper than its face value, which should include all hunters, anglers, bikers, and people who eat. Anyway, sorry for the long email, but I had to write in about a situation I'm facing. For some background on my plea for advice, I'm a junior studying wildlife ecology and management at Oklahoma State University. I consider myself a hunter, though I can count on one hand the amount of times that I have gone out on just a day hunt this year. What can I say? Video games are easy. Oh, why is this happening?
Ben, I don't think you understand how video game culture and games in general have, what's the word? Proliferated?
Yeah. I apparently don't. I thought we were in a safe space. I thought we were in the trust tree where we all go outside and we don't worry about video games. But apparently I'm wrong.
There are dozens of us.
There are dozens of cult members. I consider myself fairly savvy, says Zach, on the outdoors and try to keep up to date on conversations and conservation issues throughout my state in the United States. It is my dream to one day work as a wildlife biologist or a game warden. I am in need of a bit of a sage wisdom about a situation surrounding my current roommate. I live in a single-wide trailer on a 30-acre piece of ground with great fishing and a duck pond attached outside of my college town. This land and trailer is owned by one of my roommate's family members. My roommate on the outside is a diehard redneck hunter. The majority of his wardrobe is camouflage. The house is decorated with turkey fans and painted European mounts, and his ammunition is strewn about the house to underscore his lack of firearms knowledge, competence, and safety. Hunting appears to be his life, as he historically skipped some of our shared classes because he was out hunting or drinking the night before. Ron Boehm, friend of the Meat Ron Boehm, friend of the Meat Eater podcast and a badass fellow. He says on the Hunting Dog podcast, it has a term for this type of hunter that really describes my roommate, Joe 12 Gauge. Speaking of the hunting dogs, he has a 1-year-old black lab that he quote unquote trains as a retriever. The irony in my roommate is that he and I share a major passion, wildlife and hunting. Why is this ironic? Well, my roommate does a lot of hunting. During dove season in September, he hunted every afternoon of the first couple of weeks of the season. He put me on my first ever ducks this year on the duck opener. He helped his younger brother harvest his first deer back in November and has absolutely provided access to his family's ground and a family's friend's land to help some of his friends limit out on ducks and deer. This in and of itself is absolutely awesome, and taken alone is nothing but an advancement of the hunting community. And this would indeed be the case if he didn't ignore hunting regulations and our values with reckless abandon. He does not treat wildlife with the respect they are due. When he shoots an animal, he will wait for hours or even days to process it. This is not dry aging either. He leaves their carcasses out in the rain, exposed and unrefrigerated, often ungutted. More times than not, he includes a drink or two or 7 before he starts a hunt, often on the drive over. He has set and hunted over bait for migratory birds several times. He has exceeded aggregate possession limits on waterfowl, ignored means of take, hunted outside of shooting light, hunted from a moving boat, and his most recent offense has been shooting a limit of ducks and leaving it on my porch for 3 days so far in 50-degree weather. I have done my part to advise him and the people that he hunts with that they are not in full compliance with the law. I have also excuse myself from hunts that may be illegal or unsafe, a mega nerd move for sure, but the right move nonetheless. Herein lies my moral dilemma and plea for advice. I do not know what to do. He cannot continue operating like this. He is liable to get himself or others hurt. There are several times where I have told him to watch where his muzzle was pointing as he flagged myself and others in our hunting party. He's also going to catch charges at some point. Getting away with these relatively small violations now is only going to embolden him to start blatantly poaching in the future. I know I cannot enforce my morality on my roommate, but his hunting style during and especially after the shot go against my true values. Any advice on this situation would be greatly appreciated. I do not know whether I should contact a game warden, give him a come to Jesus meeting, or do nothing. I'm very hesitant to take any action, but I know something should be done. Okay, Phil. Yikes. I'll let you go first there, Philip. Dr. Phil.
Wow, so kind of you.
Yes, give him somebody.
I mean, this is just tough for me because I don't really know the culture. I've never been in it. From an outsider's perspective, though, I mean, like I've said this before, these are the kind of people and stories that non-hunters hear, and it gives you all a bad name. Like this, it's the stuff that it disgusts you. It turns you away from hunting and hunters. It sets stereotypes up. It's not good. It's like not good for conservation, but it's also not good for the way hunters look in the public eye. That being said, it's really easy for me to sit behind this mic and be like, oh, you should call a game warden and turn him in. But I mean, I don't know, Ben. Is that something you would do? Like, I don't think sitting him down and having an intervention is going to help anything.
Yeah, man. Why I think this is tough. And again, there's so much nuance in this. And I know everybody likes when I use that term now, but there's so much nuance in this. And I would just say this: there are assholes in every line of work, and there are assholes in every pursuit. There are asshole golfers that cheat. There are asshole hunters that poach and break the law. The difference in golf is you're probably not hurting anybody. You might be stealing somebody's money in a gambling situation, but you're probably not hurting anybody by, doing a Donald Trump, picking your ball up and throwing it toward the green when nobody's looking. So you're not hurting anybody. But in this case, you're doing damage to everyone around you in and of the fact that you're breaking the law, but also, as Zach said, they're disrespecting what we all do and what we've collectively determined to be a valuable part of our lives. And then also you have the part for wildlife management and conservation that gets baked into that. But here's the other deal, Phil. Let's just be honest for a minute. Social pressures, most people, illegality is based on, for a lot of really good folks that get into really dumb situations, is based on social pressures. Would you agree with that?
I mean, you're right. It doesn't. The thing is, like, I totally get being in those social pressure situations when you're younger, like when you're in high school or in college or hell. I mean, I'll even give you like mid to late 20s. But I mean, like, at some point, you realize what kind of a person you are and what you want to be, and you just stop hanging out with those people.
Dude, that's where I'm at, man.
So it's like, I mean, sorry, man, but if this guy is like still your friend and you're still hanging out with him, like I know you said that you've politely excused yourself from hunts that might become illegal, but it's just like, it's tough, man. Like you get to an age where you're old enough where you make big boy decisions and you cut these people out of your life.
Yeah, as always, Phil brings the heat. And you're right, man. You're absolutely right. You got to Zach in this case has to make a decision to put himself in a situation where he's never going to be influenced in that way. And I will personally, I'm not going to name names or get into this, but I've had situations within the hunting industry where I felt like that's something I'm not going to do again. And have excused myself from that situation. And in some cases, cut that person out of my life where I felt like it wasn't good. And so that's what you got to do. I think often people would respect you more if you do that. People would find a way to, have some self-awareness. But if you just don't think your roommate's going to do that, you may not just waste your time. You just remove yourself from the situation and move on. But again, if you're a party to something illegal, you also have you also probably have the responsibility to call it in if it's continuing, and you may save someone's life. I mean, we talked about last week a death in the duck blind with Ramondo Venditosi. Phil, we could probably just dropped it at what you said last time, man. Remove yourself from the damn situation, and to continue to be a positive influence. It sounds like you are. So we'll move on from that. But, as we go into the year of the new hunter here, and we talk about emergent hunters as we go forward, this is something that everybody may have to deal with. And it's certainly easier to deal with if you're a new hunter, if you're an emergent hunter. You're an adult. You can make those decisions, as Phil just said. And it's a lot different if you're a 10-year-old boy and some of this stuff is going on, and this is the culture of your family or the culture you're growing up in, man, you just go along in almost every situation. So this is something that I think emergent hunters are going to deal with more and are more equipped to deal with, obviously, and something that as folks crack into the hunting world, if they see that, they're going to have to deal with it. And so it's good. I appreciate you putting it out there, Zach, and so we can talk about it a little bit. Anything else, Phil, you want to drop us? Just drop a knowledge bomb at the end of this? You really walk away? Costanza this shit?
Nope.
No.
I feel like that's the most authentic Costanza moment is blowing it at the end. So,
yeah. Nope.
Nope.
Perfect. All right. Now we're gonna get into what we want to talk about today, and there's a whole lot that goes into what we're talking about with Miles Nolte. But first, I want to read you an email from Russell Edwards, Victoria, Australia. One of our many Aussies and New Zealanders that listen to this podcast. Shout out to you guys. We love you. You guys always seem to be the most opinionated and the most well-educated on wildlife issues. Maybe because it's where you live, or maybe it's because you're all badasses. I'm not sure, but thanks for listening. Russell said, where I come from in Victoria, Australia, we literally have protesters on the marshes during duck season. He said, it's fucked. And by the way, on the term fuck, Phil, have you watched the Netflix documentary, The History of Curse Words?
I haven't, no. How is it?
It's fantastic. Nicolas Cage is the host of it. It features many of my favorite comedians. It's just fantastic. I just watched the one last night. on the term fuck, the history of the term fuck, and the relevancy of the term fuck. And it only emboldened me more to include it in this podcast not wherever I can, but I need to probably be a little bit more tactile in the way that I use the term. But the celebration of the word just emboldened me a little bit more. So anybody that ever wrote in and said, hey, stop cussing, it's not looking good for you.
Oh, no, Eric Hall's rolling over in his truck.
He's rolling over his truck. All right. Russell said, I don't think it's a case of a slippery slope fallacy, and I don't think there is some quote-unquote middle ground that is occupied by less controversial hunting methods. I think these hard-nosed campaigners look for what is the most alien-seeming practice, and they target that one in the hope of recruiting the most number of people, even KFC munchers, to their cause. It is a form of cultural xenophobia. It may even be the case there is no grand conspiracy. It may be simply a process of blind selection. People get upset about all kinds of things, but the ones who most successfully provoke a xenophobic reaction are the ones who build a movement. I fully stand with our buddy Clay Newcomb and his guard the gate mentality. In fact, my concern was one of the factors leading me to take up duck hunting after many years of deer hunting. Duck hunting is the pinup anti-campaign here, mainly because they are the only non-fish native game species, because apparently fish don't have feelings and foreign animals should be exterminated, although preferably by professionals who don't enjoy it. But yes, we have hound hunting for deer here, and those guys will absolutely be next in the firing line. Ever since your interview with fellow Victorian Paul Bashir, Ben, I have been struggling to be patient with these people. They are, by and large, so fucking dumb. Russell Edwards. So this leads me into lots of things. Certainly leads me into a little bit of our conversation with Miles today. But, man, I don't know. We're definitely going to take a different tack than Russell in this case. I don't think all these people are dumb. Misguided, surely. Activism can become a lot of things. So I'm sad to see that there are people protesting your duck hunt in the marshes when you're heading out. I've never experienced that, but if I was bear hunting in New Jersey, I probably would. So we've seen that in this country as well. But part of what we're talking about today is this idea of hate-based media. And I, as I said earlier, Phil, this is maybe a little bit self-indulgent for me. There's a lot of things we want to talk about this year with new hunting and try to bring people along. But I think this applies to that topic. And this is the idea that the national media, most types of media, social media, a lot of the communication in this country is based on hatred and division, and is based on a lot of what Russell just mentioned here in terms of cultural xenophobia. He mentions people get upset about all kinds of things he wrote in there, but the ones who most successfully provoke a reaction are the ones who build a movement. We've talked about that before on the show in terms of making fun of the term cult. We've talked about that in terms of approaching vegans and anti-hunters with an open mind and open arms at some level, but then objectively taking in their information and trying to suss out what's really going on. We've talked about that. Maybe that's the value proposition of this show as we've gone along. I think it's something we certainly need to dig into. Miles and I were able to unearth some examples we felt like were very relevant in our hunting and fishing culture. And I think when you hear from some of the listeners of this show, some of the new hunters, people are still struggling with the ways to approach the cultural division, even within our own pursuits. So, important conversation. We're going to have it right now with Miles Nolte.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there because they're great and they're super friendly and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Miles Nolte, what's up, man?
Oh, happy to be here, brother. Happy to be here, as always.
Happy to have you, as always. We need to hear a little bit about the podcast, how it's going. Bent. We haven't really talked about it that much on this show. I know we did when it launched, and we've been advertising it and pushing it. How is Meat Eater's first ever fishing only podcast?
I'm a pretty biased source.
I know.
I think it's great. I think I can be an honest critic of my own work. I think it took us a couple months to really find our stride with the show, and I think the first few months were good, but I think what we're doing now is much better, and we've just got a better rhythm, and we're flowing. Again, like we've said before, we're trying to give a good balance of valid information, interesting stories, and humor. And one thing that we definitely don't do is take ourselves too seriously, because there's way too much of that going on in outdoor media in general and fishing media specifically. So we don't do that.
Yeah, you guys, I mean, fishing is fun on your show. It's not always fun other places. Sometimes it's boring. I'm not looking at you, Bill Dance.
God, no. Bill's never boring.
Bill's the man. But yeah, it's, when you take a bit of a chance to put out something like you guys have, and if you haven't heard it, go listen to it. You'll immediately know what I mean by this. Take a little bit of chance to do something different and follow your own, sensibilities and personalities of you and Joe Cermelli. I mean, it might be a home run right off the bat, or it might take some time. So I'm glad that old Meat Eaters are giving you time to talk about what you want to talk about, man.
Me too. And I think one of the pieces of that show that folks, in addition to some of the stupid humor that we do, which is there are some significant bits to chew on as well. We do a fish news every week where we really dig into anything fish related in the news and try and chop it up and have some analysis of it, which will tie into what we're about to talk about. And it is a mixture of high-low. We have like really dumb poop jokes, and then we have book reviews of like elevated Hemingway literature. Like we try and hit all the angles.
Sounds familiar. We have, like when I first started this show, I didn't think it through that thoroughly. To be honest, I was just copying Steve Rinella and Joe Rogan. I feel like there was a lot of people in our space that that's what podcasts were, because that's what had vaulted to kind of the top of the heap at that time. Just casual or at least pointed conversations that could go any direction. They're very organic in nature, and that's what I think all of us kind of started with. And what's cool about Bent and some of the other shows that we're working on at Meat Eater is that we're starting to turn from that a bit now that that's saturated our space.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not that much room for Stephen Rinellas and Joe Rogans in the world, and there aren't very many of them. So if you're trying to beat those guys at their game, you're going to lose. You got to do your own thing, man.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I mean, there's a space podcasts that are maturing into a big damn business now. All these big carriers are jumping in and turning it into something that it wasn't even 5 years ago. And so who knows where the next 5 years will go. But anyway, we're not here to talk about all that. Listen to Ben if you hadn't, you dumbasses. Get on it. Get on it right now. Now, like when I think you were the first person. Well, let me start this way. It's probably better to start this way. I didn't, as we talked about last week on the show, we want to focus a lot on new hunters and teaching people and learning from folks that are new to our pursuits this year. And we talked a little bit about, kind of the tenor of the moment, what was going on in the country last week, but we didn't touch on it directly. And I think, Miles, you were the first person that I talked to this about because we were on the phone about something work related, and it was like, wait, turn on the TV. There is an event going on.
Something is happening, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and then we both, proceeded to watch in horror.
Yeah.
What unfolded, right? And I'm, to break down what actually happened there is not for a podcast like this, but what you and I do for a living, and what we're very invested in is the role of media in all of this, and the role of people who have opinions and are people that are journalists and report the news, and how those cross sections affect us all. And I know, and the reason I wanted to have you on to kind of talk about this is because I know you're invested in, the role of politics in, what we do in enthusiast spaces like hunting and fishing, but also how we think about critical issues and how we're able to objectively seek truth and how we're able to reason things out in a way that's healthy for all of us, and you and I don't always agree on everything, but we're able to have conversations that are respectful and seem to go somewhere. We can learn from each other.
I think that's part of the reason why I was excited to have this conversation with you, because just as buddies, we talk about things all the time, and the tone and tenor of those conversations is so much different than the way I see debate or disagreement reflected back almost anywhere in a public or media-based space, right? Like you and I disagree on a lot of things politically, but through talking that stuff out, we're never attacking one another. We're never trying to undermine each other in a personal way. And I usually end up learning something from that, or coming to at least be able to recognize a different perspective that I hadn't seen before, whether I end up agreeing with it or not. And it's hard to overstate the value of that right now.
It really is like a foundational respect for someone else's humanity.
Yeah.
And they're right and privileged to develop opinions in the way that they do from their own life experiences and perspectives. We're at a position right now where a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people are shutting themselves off from differing perspectives.
And look, I know this sounds like overblown and maybe a little megalomaniacal, but like the part of the reason why I wanted to get into and why I believe in outdoor media is I feel like it has the possibility to be one of those few areas where people who disagree about just about everything else can find some common ground. Like we care about outdoor spaces. We care about access to healthy lands and waters. We care about our ability to maintain the cultures that are so important to us. Like, let's set everything else aside. Let's just say we hold those few things together, and that's certainly idealistic. It's not always true, but it's one of the things that I love or want to love about the media that we get to create is that I can bring in and speak to people with whom I may disagree completely politically, but at least we got these spaces so we can still talk to one another.
Yeah, and that's one of the first questions, and I want to get into kind of what really spurred this on. It was a Matt Taibbi article, but. Mm-hmm. And we'll quote Matt a little bit here, but that is a good point. Starting from, and we often do this on the show. Like even with animal rights activists and even with vegans and people that we're supposed to not agree with, we do start from a similar value proposition with wildlife. Like I appreciate wildlife. I want them around. Someone who's an animal rights activist definitely, and very tangibly says that they appreciate wildlife and want them around. We just have different tactics to get to that end result in management and the way that we wrap our heads around, essentially cohabitation. So even in those conversations, I realize a shared set of values. And in the broader political conversation, and certainly in the way that the media is set up now, people are losing that starting point. They're losing this idea that there's so much we agree on let's start from there, and then we can work to where, respectfully we disagree on something.
That respectfully word is the hard one right now. But yeah, nope, I agree.
So I sent you a link to this article, and to be quite honest with everyone listening, I don't know how to address something like the Capitol riots. I don't even really know what to call them, and because there's so many weighted words and so much semantics at play, and how we present these, and we'll discuss that here in a minute. But I don't know how to address that. It's so weighted for me. I haven't had enough time to process it. I can only say that it was a disgusting act that I hope we never see again in American history. I hope it is something that we all learn from and we don't repeat. But again, what we're about to talk about it in terms of our news media has me thinking that we might be doomed to repeat it again in some form in a very short time from right now. And so might as well talk about it. Might as well crack open some of how the media plays a role in this, because they play, in my opinion, quite a huge role. So there's
and let's be fair, we can't say they when we talk about the media, because even if we want to wall ourselves off into outdoor media, we're still media, man. So we have to recognize that we have some responsibility to own.
For sure. Yeah, and that's the fact that anyone who's listening to us talking means that we have a chance to contribute to what's wrong or be an agent for change at some level. If you go, there's a website called Substack.com that hosts a lot of independent journalists and a lot of independent voices. And one of those voices is Matt Taibbi. You have a lot of experience with Taibbi?
I don't actually. I will admit that this article you sent me was my foray into his writing and his thinking, and I'm intrigued. I'm going to check out more.
He is one of my favorites. The way he breaks down the media, number one, is huge, but just the way he understands culture and his bend toward investigative journalism and objectivity is something that obviously is rare in this space. And so, if you haven't read Matt Taibbi, read him. I'm not saying you have to be as in love with him as I am, but certainly check him out and make that choice of your own. But he wrote an article called "We Need a New Media System." And the header here is, if you sell culture war all day, don't be surprised by the real world consequences. We're gonna reverse engineer this article. We'll present the ending paradox and kind of work our way through what's going on. But something I've been calling the Taibbi, we'll call it for this example, the Taibbi paradox. And what he says at the end of this article, entitled "We Need a New Media," has what we've been watching for 4 years, and in this case he's talking about the Trump presidency. And what we saw explode last week, and in that case, the Capitol riots, is a paradox, a political and informational system that profits from division and conflict and uses a factory-style process to stimulate it, but professes shock and horror when real conflict happens. It's time to admit this is a failed system. You can't sell hatred and seriously expect it to end. What's your reaction to that, Miles?
I mean, so my reaction to that is that it's spot on. I think that the key words in that are profit and sell.
Yeah.
As we dig into this conversation, those are the two concepts I want to keep to the fore, because I think they're very important as we sort of untangle all this.
Yeah, and I think a key to this is, the way that why we're talking about this, and kind of like the way that I want to look at it is, what is the media's role overall? But then what's our role in the media for niche spaces like hunting and fishing? We have definitely, and what Taibbi is saying here in many ways, is that the media has taken polarization and sold it. And polarization is often coupled with the flaming of hatred. Fanning the flames of hatred is what I'm trying to say.
Yep.
And that has affected how we reason and our collective ability to seek truth and find objective truth. And we're stuck with a very toxic way of looking at the world, and that's a narrative-based way of thinking and a shit ton of confirmation bias, not only in politics, but in our own lives.
I mean, I totally agree with you there. I got to say two things. One, I'm skeptical of the way the concept of getting away from narrative, right? Because I think no matter, even in the most quote unquote objective sense, the way that we organize information of like what causes what is a narrative.
Yeah.
And
Maybe
so
it's
I
the
don't,
wrong term. Like
I don't know that we get away from narrative. It's just that we need to think about narrative in less polarizing ways.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, well, it's just kind of like the weaponizing of narrative.
Yeah.
You know, it would be the issue. And an example of that, obviously, is if you're told something, and in the case of the Capitol riots, if you're told there's a fraudulent election and one side is stealing this election from another, you're going to be looking around and trying to confirm that bias. You're going to be trying to, if you're told that you believe in this so fervently, your way of reasoning is going to be based on that confirmation bias that you now have. That one thing is evil and one thing is good. And it often say that to create a movement, you do not need a God, but you do need a devil. And certainly we are creating devils out of each other in the grand scheme of our national conversation.
And that really was well put. And I think that, look, it's kind of basic human psychology, right? There are things that work more quickly in our brains than others, and by things I mean narrative triggers. So fear and other emotional responses immediately elicit a response, like or a change in the way we think about something, whereas something that's much more methodical and based on, you have to ration it out. That takes time and it takes effort. And if you're trying to sell people a media product, the fastest way to get them to consume it and really identify it and go all in on it is to pull those emotional strings and pull those levers. And fear is a real strong one.
Yeah, and we're going to get to some other examples, but this is something in my work in conservation, what I do, sitting on the board for backcountry hunters and anglers, and even when I was employed at the NRA, National Rifle Association, you could see, I think one is a more stark example than the other, but you can see this type of, you could see the pull of this, of creating, what we'll call the slippery slope here, which is creating a battle for something. Public lands are under attack. Your gun rights are under attack. Mm-hmm. There's more fervent support for things that are under attack, things that may go away. And so are we creating these false narratives in our own spaces about what might happen to our guns, what might happen to our public land, and using those same mechanisms to incite support for the things that we care about? And it means a lot to me to be able to say, I do believe in gun rights. I do believe in protecting the environment and access to our public lands, but I'm not willing to travel down the path of inciting or at least invoking some fear in the people that have joined my organization just to get the end result. It becomes a toxic environment if it goes too far. And that's kind of where that slippery slope comes in.
It does. And here's where I want to get into the Taibbi article you brought up, because he ultimately he lays out an elegant description of the problem. I give him a ton of credit for the way that it's worded and the way it's put together. I think he's spot on in describing the problem. But then he gets to the end where he tries to give a prescriptive solution. And this is where it gets problematic for me, because, he says media companies need to get out of the audience stroking business. And we need a new media channel, a press version of the third party where those financial pressures to maintain audience are absent. Right. And that's great. But how do we do that? Right. And that's where I feel like it's a little bit of a cop out, because who's gonna build that, and how is that gonna be incentivized? And this is gonna get a little heady, but I think it's important to recognize that, the granularity of information that he's talking about, that ties into the new landscape of targeted marketing, right? We're getting customized news the same way that we're getting customized banner ads every time we open the internet. It's all in the same algorithms. And since that marketing that I'm talking about right there is what pays for the news, I don't get how there's a solution other than some kind of a third party, which would have to be the government stepping in and creating this new news channel, at which point we just have state-sponsored news, and that's not a solution either. So that's where I run into a wall on this thing, man, because I totally agree with him, and we live in a free market system, and that free market extends to our media. And right now, the money is in that micro-targeting and by separating people in these tiny little silos and feeding them what they want to see. So how do we get out of that?
The attention economy. That's the real question. I mean, at the core of this is how do we get out of the attention economy in the way that it's... Yeah, the attention economy isn't the problem. The way we weaponize the attention economy is the problem, right? Like, we're going to have to continue, from the printing press on, the attention economy grew. It's only become more sophisticated, right, in the way that it's been targeted. But Taibbi says, there's a couple other things that he says that'll help us track this. He says, specifically speaking about news organizations mainstream, he says media firms work backwards. They first ask, how does our target demographic want to understand what's just unfolded? Then they pick the words and the facts they want to emphasize. This is my favorite. This is really one of my favorite analogies. He says, news companies now clean world events like whalers, using every part of the animal, funneling different facts to different consumers based upon calculations about what will bring the biggest engagement kick. The migrant caravan, Fox slices off comments from a Homeland Security official describing most of the border crossers as single adults coming for economic reasons. The New York Times counters by running a story about how the caravan was deployed as a political issue by the Trump White House, staring at poor results in midterm elections. Certainly million more examples. That's just the one he chose in that particular paragraph, but there's a million more examples. But I think returning to kind of the tactic here is to look at it's not to look at an event in its totality and try to dissect it in a logical way. It is to use the narrative that you've built and then take parts of what's happened, in this case, immigration, and apply it to the narrative that you've already established with your audience. And the audience comes right along.
But I mean, I think you're absolutely right. But I also think that the reality is that that's what feeds people. Like, we have now, unfortunately, proven that what gets people riled up and gets them to really have allegiance to a media brand, and that allegiance then translates into sales and effective marketing, is that picking and that choosing and that feeding of what feels comfortable. Audiences, and this goes for all of us, we don't like to encounter what's uncomfortable. That's we're not going to keep coming back to a source that makes us feel uncomfortable if we can go somewhere else that makes us feel warm and fuzzy and comfortable.
That's exactly, when I made a post earlier this year before I got off Instagram altogether that was making a joke about a dilapidated falling over building and where I was hunting in eastern Montana with a Trump sign on it. I thought that's hilarious. I'm like, oh, how analogous is this? Like, it's just hilarious to me. The satire, it's like thick. This is, and so I post this, and two things happened that really lighted me up. One, people that I actually respected who are fans of this show, who write into our THC at the Meat Eater inbox all the time, were in the comment thread saying they would never listen to me again, right? Because they believed one thing or another. I thought, wow, that is, we're in such a heightened state right now. And this is right before the election. So it's I would say it's a different time, but maybe not, because people are storming the Capitol, the seat of power in our country. But at the time, what struck me is, one, how the polarization in the comment section fueled the Instagram algorithm. I bet more people saw that post because of the engagement, quote unquote, than anything I posted ever about anything, because of the way it made people feel and the fact that it fired them up and the fact that they were polarized on that position. So it was like an illustration of social media algorithms and what they do, right? How they kind of capitalize on that. And the other thing I told people in that, of all the people who said, I'm unfollowing you, I don't want to see this, I said, if you are made uncomfortable, to the point you just made, if you are made uncomfortable by points of view that are not your own, please leave now. See yourself out. Like, this space, this podcast, and the other things that we mention here and the people that we promote, hopefully are not going to be engaging in this kind of bubble think, in this kind of creation of ideological corners. It's just boring to me. It's fucking boring.
I would say it goes beyond boring to be like, massively problematic, but you're absolutely right. And the idea, one of the things I like about what you do and I really respect about your show is your idea that, like, look, we're primarily this podcast that covers topics interesting to hunters and people who enjoy wild spaces. And therefore that gives me the opportunity to kind of chop up all these other things because I'm going to get people who disagree on those other things into the same space at the same time, right? So theoretically, that should be an opportunity to be like, look, you have to see all these different ideas. You have to be confronted with them. And if the reaction is, wait, I think you might be on the other side, so I'm out. Dude, I don't know where we go from there.
Yeah, there's nowhere to go from there because you're now to the point where you have such, and this goes back to Taibbi's point where we've hate incorporated. We've so commoditized hate that's what people feel when they see ideas, even it's the suggestion of idea that's the antithesis of what they've come to believe or the narrative that they've painted for themselves. It's not that when that narrative comes about that you say, well, I don't agree with that. Let me break down why that person thinks that. I respect them. I trust that they're not a bad person. Let me figure out how they got to where they are. And along the way, hope to become a better person myself and to be educated by how they got to being an anti-gunner or an anti-hunter or an animal rights activist or whatever they are. And then when I go back to defend the thing I'm really passionate about, I now have more ammo in the gun. Because I have looked at the dogma in my own space, because I've examined my own preconceived notion of what's true, I can now objectively say I'm doing better. Like I have a more like a healthier view of why someone might not want to do what I do or might think what I do is awful.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think a particular, and I think it's helpful for us to work off of like specific and personal examples with this, right? Because as you start to spread it out globally, it gets really muddy and then you're just painting people with a really broad brush, which is part of the reason why we're here. So like, let's look at a specific example. I remember months ago, you put something up somewhere. It might've even been that same post where you said, I'm going to vote for Trump. That's what I think I'm going to do. And I picked up the phone and I called you. Do you remember this? Mm-hmm. Because personally, and I will admit this, that was not a choice that I was comfortable making. Let me make it clear, vote. You weren't the only one that got a lot of phone calls. I'm sure you did, man. And I didn't call you if you remember. I didn't call you to be like, what the fuck, man? You're evil. That was not the way that conversation went. What I called you, and I think what I remember saying was, help me understand. Yeah. What's your logic here? Because I really respect the way you think, and I know we don't agree on a lot of things, but this is one that I don't understand. Please help me understand it.
Yeah. The other thing that bothered me about that, and this happens across the board, is that it somehow takes people see it as courage. I know it to be courage because you do have something on the line when you say I'm going to vote for X in the public sphere, because cancel culture being what it is, audience support being needed to do what we do, some level of reputation and for honesty and respect and integrity being needed to do what we do. All of that is at risk if you say who you voted for, or you say what your religious beliefs are, or if you say what your sexual orientation is, or if you say any of the really important foundational things about you. You're at risk of alienating some percentage of your audience because of hate incorporated, because of people are being trained to hate the other. But in the case of that, may be straying way far from the point where we're talking about here.
I actually don't think it is. Let me try and tie it together for you, because as people who work in media, we have that pressure. And part of the way that we survive, the way that we get to keep our jobs, is by having enough people like us. Yeah. Right. And if we step outside of the space of what we think our audience wants to hear and announce something that could be challenging or problematic, we're literally risking our livelihoods. So I will agree that was a brave move that you pulled there.
Can I be clear too that after no influence by you other than just talking it through with me, I voted for Biden. Like I got to and people people in my family were questioning, like, how could you be so wishy-washy? And I said, it's a hard decision for me. It was a hard decision for me because I care about so many things passionately. And I got to the voting booth, very nervously stood there, looked around, went for put the pen toward the Trump bubble and took my pen back. And then I thought, can't vote for this guy. Just can't do it. And then I bubbled in. I thought about writing in someone that I really wanted to be president. I thought, no, that's a waste. And so I circled Biden. Like, I don't, and then I held my breath thinking, did I make the wrong choice? And so the fact that I was struggling with that, and I would very honestly tell anyone I struggled with it. And I'm not a zealot for Trump or a zealot for Biden. Somebody who was confused but also knew this was a very important vote, and also knew this was something that I had to think about and do right. And I have kids, and I thought about them, and I thought, what am I going to prioritize for my children in the society I want them to step into? And it was tough, man. It was really tough. And I don't know in our polarized times that there's room for it to be tough.
And that's the thing, man. Like, let's just throw this out this way and to contextualize what we're talking about, to bring it back to where we started. If you and I happen to be working in a different media outlet, let's use Fox News for example, and maybe you had a similar difficulty in the decision that you were faced with. If you actually had to recognize that this is not a simple decision,
wow, and
you made that public, you would lose your job, I think.
That's right. New York Times be the same way.
Exactly.
Right?
No, 100%. I used that exact that one, but if it were the other way around, and you wrote for, or you worked at MSNBC, you'd be painted into the same corner.
Yep. Yeah. It is. I mean, there's a line in this in terms of Trump in the Taibbi article. Everyone monetized Trump, and when he said that, I was like, that's one of the more poignant lines that
it is
I could think of. Everyone monetized Trump. They monetized hatred of Trump or love of Trump, but both sides dove in headfirst to this polarizing character because it fit into this hate incorporated way of making money. Either hate them or love them. As long as you do it intensely, we can make money off you. As long as you feel strongly about it, we're good to go. You'll keep watching. And that's dangerous, man. This is like just a dangerous premise all the way around for all of us.
I think I could not agree with that, what that article's premise was more. And I think he said it more eloquently than I've read it elsewhere. I'm just stuck on within the constraints of how our consumerist media works. Like, I don't know how you break that.
Yeah, I don't know how you break it either. I mean, it really, his suggestion hints at something. But again, I don't want to be trite in bringing up Joe Rogan, but here's a guy who really doesn't do anything unless he wants to do it. He's not owned by any media company. He doesn't have any agenda that I know of, knowing him and having been on that show a couple of times. He doesn't have any agenda other than his own curiosity and his own need to seek out things that he is interested in and are relevant to him. And staying true to that has allowed him to grow that show into some astronomical heights in terms of how many people listen. So that's one example. He is one example, I think, of someone who's been kind of outside the fray in terms of big media and the corporate interests and some of the political interests and things like that. But he's still not, he's still in it at some level. He's not immune to it, but maybe a shining light of an individual who kept it small, kept it real and original, and tried to present information on his own bend. But certainly not a journalist, not an expert.
Yeah, and that's the problem there, right? Like, as someone who does have kind of a journalistic background, that's where I run into a problem with that, because he's not trying to report any news.
No.
And the other thing, like, it's tough to draw too many conclusions from a sample size of one.
Yes. Yeah.
That would be the other place that I stumble with that one.
Those are and he is the exception, right? And I've seen a lot of people and heard a lot of people on his show marvel at his ability to stay out of the corporate cycle, to stay out of the investment cycle, or to not get bought up by something that would influence the content. And people marvel at that because that's the way it works. And to your point, I don't know how you change that going forward. But Taibbi goes on to quote Mitch McConnell. He said, he says in reference to what we've talked about earlier, repeat this info sifting process a few billion times. And this is how we became, as none other than Mitch McConnell put it last week, a country that, quote, is drifting apart into two separate tribes with a separate set of facts and separate realities with nothing in common except our hostility towards each other and mistrust for the few national institutions that we all still share. That's pretty well put, Mitch. The last part is what got me. Mistrust of the few institutions that we still share. And to reverse course to your point earlier, Miles, when we get into kind of an enthusiast space like we're in, everybody listens to this podcast. We're assuming everyone listens to this podcast shares a value system around hunting. And even more shares like a specific value system that we discuss here quite often, right? A value system that got them in the door and is keeping them around. There's probably plenty of people that listen to this just to hate it. But I would hope that the bulk of the people are learning together and sharing the ideas that are presented on a show like this. But back to the mistrust of the few national institutions, Mitch McConnell's right. He's dead on, and I don't usually like what Mitch McConnell has to say, but in this case,
yeah. I mean, the statement there is accurate. I'm pretty over representatives from both sides. I'm not pinning this to one side or the other, ratcheting up the division against the other side and then turning around and screaming like, this is exactly why we're all so against each other. Like, I don't think one day you can be fueling those fires and the next day being like, hold on guys, we can't keep doing this. Like, that's
a good point though. I listen to guys like Ben Shapiro and like political talking heads, and this is what they do though. It's become such a us versus them mentality that we could play the paradox game. We could present all paradox, like everything has become a paradox and also a parody of itself. By like you are presenting a narrative based way of looking at the world. Like you've decided on we are, the conservative Republican ideals, or in the case, the liberal progressive ideals are the way forward. They're evil, we're good. And so every show is just affirming that thing. Look at all the evil things that they did. Look at all the things they did wrong. Even if you're aware of some hypocrisy, that you've also done this. And again, we may start playing a paradox game where we're just like, watch the news and write down all the things. Because but the false equivalencies and the way that people rationalize things now is in an us versus them paradox. And if you do it, it's not bad. If they do it, it is. And then they just round and round and round we go.
I mean, it's propaganda 101, man. And
that's what it is.
And to bring this to our own personal space, right? Because I'm sure there are a lot of people out there right now who are like, I don't really give a shit what these guys think about national politics. I go to them for hunting and fishing, and valid. Totally get it. But the point I think I want to make is that we're borrowing some of these same techniques that we see in national media, and we're applying them very successfully in our niche media. I mean, I see it in fishing media all the time. And there are these relatively popular fishing meme accounts, and the way that they get big is by pitting different regional subsets or stylistic subsets of anglers against one another into these comment feuds. And it just makes me sad, to be perfectly honest. And I get it, because their engagement on those posts is through the roof, right? Like if they, and I'll use an example, right? One of the ones that people love to do is to fire up the debate about whether or not Great Lakes steelhead are actually steelhead. And for context, steelhead are a Pacific Northwest fish. They like go into the ocean, but they put steelhead in the Great Lakes, and now they migrate in and out of the Great Lakes in the trips. And for some reason, this has created a fight, a semantic fight. Like, those aren't real steelhead. They've never been to the ocean. No, screw you, uppity left coasters and your real steelhead. Like, it's so dumb. But if you do a post that gets people on that topic, your comment section explodes and your popularity increases, your visibility increases. They're leveraging that same tactic on a much smaller scale within our industry all the time. And it just makes me sad.
Yeah, and why wouldn't they draw from that playbook?
Yeah.
That is the playbook. That's what's being incentivized in social media and news media. It's the painting of that broad brush. I mean, I could go all day in hunting. I had people, I'm off Instagram totally, so don't come try to send me some message about the show or whatever. I'll get back on. I'm just taking a break. I'll get back on. But I'm taking a break because it's just, I don't like it. It's not fun for me.
It's a terrible place.
It's stupid. It's also just, it's just a stupid place where people are manufacturing all types of false narratives and all types of false realities for everyone to either make fun of or celebrate. So, but when you go there, you go anywhere at a larger scale like that where conversation's happening. Hunters that hunt with a crossbow, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Versus vertical bow hunters. Not only do we have a bit of a debate about the efficacy and the wildlife management implications of a crossbow, both good and bad, and also new hunters coming in and being able to use a crossbow. We don't just do that. What do? We start to characterize and stereotype. The guy with the crossbow drinks Mountain Dew and eats Casey's Pizza. The guy with the vertical bow wears Sitka and is elitist. Mm-hmm. We're doing the same college-educated, high school-educated, rural-urban discourse. We're parroting that discourse. All we're doing is applying it to the differences in our space. That's all we're doing. That's what you just described with fishing. Exactly. And I could just we could point to a ton of different ones in hunting. We can point to a ton of different ones in fishing. I think the point that we're trying to make is this set of plays, this way of having your media system function works right now, but it has really terrible implications. And so, look, I feel I'm a little concerned that I'm trying to paint myself as holier than thou in this, I'm above that. I don't really think about it that way, but I really do try and avoid leveraging that particular tactic in the media that I create, because I think it's lazy and I think it's destructive. So, but there's also shades of gray, when it comes to sometimes stereotypes make comedy work. You have segments on your show. We do stuff all the time here where we're clearly performing satire, where we're clearly just having fun with the cultural differences from place to place or from pursuit to pursuit or whatever. And that certainly is a part of who we are too. So there's shades of gray, and I'm not saying that. I look back on a lot of things I've done, and I'm certainly in 10 years if I ever come back and listen to some of the episodes of my podcast, I go, whoa. The hell are you talking about, man? I hope I do, because I hope I'm better than I am as I'm speaking to you right now. But I'm not saying I'm better than anybody. I'm saying these are things that bother me, and I hate it. And I want to surround myself with people that start at respect and start at respecting the differences between us and go from there. And when social media really incentivizes that division, what are you going to do? I mean, people are trained to get more engagement, to get more likes, to get more followers. That's the arcade game of social media. That's what it is. It is more points for whatever it's just get more points. My numbers are better. Yeah. Yeah. It's get more points. And then you get community status based on the number of points that you received. And then you become some character of yourself, because there's no way to speak truth. Because all of it is, every word typed into Instagram and the history of Instagram is meant to get attention in some way. You're talking about meme accounts or troll accounts on social media. They're doing the same thing. They're just angling it toward hate or toward, as we say, trolling or attacking people or citing differences. They're doing the same thing. It's just the antithesis of somebody like David Goggins or somebody that's trying to inspire people, right? And put that value system out there for everybody.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there, because they're great and they're super friendly, and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Like, we're so cynical that anything that's not trying to be that, like, postmodern is corny. Right? If you're trying to inspire people, or you're trying to be celebratory, or you're trying to be positive, you're so corny, nobody's going to listen to you. Like, you might as well just go sit in the corner with grandpa already, because like no one wants to hear that shit. And
well, yeah, even in this piece, Taibbi goes on to say, like, when he first got in the business, he thought that by the book journalists were boring.
Yeah,
that people that were searching for objectivity and never having a hard and fast opinion were boring. And I think he's turned that on. Now he sees the danger in the absence of that. But we were talking about this before. I do think there are a lot of broader examples in hunting and fishing that go to this, that we could talk about. We're not going to examine them, fully, and we didn't do a book report on these things. But I was writing down and shared with you a couple of things that I think show this. Number one, I'll just make a list of things. The green decoy push, like the website about green decoys, the push to label anyone with environmentalist tendencies, including backcountry hunters and anglers, myself and others, a green decoy. Then you have folks like Ted Nugent and Donald Trump Jr. and the National Rifle Association. Those folks, I think, are examples of the cultural divide, and folks that are fanning the flames of that cultural divide by playing some of the games there's some of the psychological games that we have talked about earlier and that Taibbi brings up. All of those are examples, I think, and I think even people hearing me bring those things up as examples, they're probably ears perked up based on what they think about these very polarizing individuals or organizations, and that's okay. But we're not going to shy away from talking about them. But one of the things that came to mind, and I would admit to not having checked in on this issue in maybe a year. It's been a while since it's been relevant. But was the National Monument production that played out in December of 2017 with Donald Trump. It was one of the first. Well, it was one of the most striking moments where I saw these two different narratives being played out within my own community, or at least in reference to our community. Do you remember having a similar? I mean, you've been around longer than me, but do you feel like this is one of the more striking times? Is that overplaying it? It was polarizing.
I think you chose an excellent crystallization for the outdoor community being presented with a set of facts that was interpreted in utterly opposite ways.
Yes. And so I did pull up two articles. One of them is on Patagonia's website. It's still there. The title is irrelevant, but their big bold headlines, and this was on their website at the time, says you were lied to and the president stole your land. So let's just say for a minute that you don't know what the national monument issue is or what happened in 2017 with the reduction of 2 specific national monuments. Let's say you don't know anything about it. Let's say it's the first time you're hearing about it. Okay, so Patagonia said at that time, you were lied to and the president stole your land.
And they, by the way, they also used that as an ad, just a straight ad that went out all over the place.
It was huge. That was a campaign, a campaign of activism on behalf of Patagonia. Now, Patagonia's in the outdoor space. They're not in the hunting or fishing space very, very much. They dabble.
They play in the fly fishing space.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. That makes sense. But they're around, right? So they're not like a core hunting and fishing brand, but they're around, and we all know that they lean left. Yvon Chouinard is who he is. The NRA, Institute for Legislative Action, said a headline about the same set of facts. NRA applauds Trump administration for restoring access to Utah public land. So, if this isn't an example of a very important topic, an essential topic for land designation and access and habitat in this country, taking this example. Now, look, this is 3 years ago, so maybe this is not a rampant thing in our space on a broad level, but this certainly is a part of it, you know.
I mean, I think it still is, but I think this is a good one to use because we can skin it really well with those headlines. And so let's just play like the fact checker arbiters of truth moment here. I will first admit my own bias and say that I was not a fan of shrinking those monuments first.
Yep.
But I will also say that if I had to rank the truthiness of those two headlines, I think the NRA's comes closer. Like it hits a little higher on the truthiness scale for me than the Patagonia one. And that doesn't, I don't care if you were opposed to that particular shrinking of monuments. Lying about it to piss people off doesn't help anyone's cause.
Yes. To read a little bit from, I'd read you a little bit from the NRA. First the Patagonia piece and then the NRA piece. And again, let's just start by saying what's happening here is there's one, the painting of motivation, purity and motivation on both sides. And again, we're going to say Trump is pure. The NRA is going to say it's Trump's motivations are pure. He's doing it for you. And Patagonia is going to say Trump is evil. He's doing it to hurt you. He's lying to you. So Patagonia said in December of 2017, the president illegally reduced Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante national monuments by nearly 2 million acres. Despite overwhelming support from the majority of Americans, nearly 3 million of whom spoke up during a public comment period in favor of protecting our national monuments, the president invoked terms like heritage, respect, glorious natural wonder, and protection to substantiate the announcement. What wasn't explained at the time, and only came to light with the release of thousands of pages of documents from Freedom of Information Act requests, was that the decision was nothing more than a political favor. Despite numerous promises by a handful of politicians that the former monuments contain no sufficient energy resources, it turns out that they do. The redrawing of boundaries was deliberate and directly influenced by an industry that spends billions of dollars lobbying the government to get what it wants. And they went on to give examples of coal, oil and gas, uranium, and other resources that sit in a place that was once a national monument and is no longer, right? So to be clear, what Patagonia is saying is that the president lied to you about his intentions so that he could do favors for his buddies in the extractive resources industry, I guess we will say in this case. That square up, Miles?
Yeah. Yeah, and if that had been their banner, then it would have scored higher on the truthiness scale. But the stealing of public lands is just purely incorrect.
Yeah, it's the redesignation, right? And so this gets back to, and you start getting into how that we take the like the whaler analogy. We take the whale and we chop it up and we present the quote unquote facts. How people see this this very important happening in the outdoors. You had Secretary Zinke at the time, who's no longer Secretary of Interior, was really playing up his relationship with hunters and anglers. This was a big thing. People wanted the support from our community on this. And so now you have the National Rifle Association, which I read to you. NRA applauds Trump administration for restoring access to Utah public lands. Now, to be clear, I'm not picking on the NRA for any other reason that when I Googled this, they came up first. So good for them on SEO. But they were not the only ones that had this. This was Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, National Wild Turkey Fair, and others parroted this same talking point. I'd want to go and double check that those folks are involved, but I'm almost 100% positive that many conservation groups in our space parroted this messaging as well around this. And they just said, this is a very press releasey. The National Rifle Association's ILA today applauded President Trump and Secretary of Interior Ryan Zinke's decision to restore access to public lands in Utah. President Trump announced today he intends to shrink the size of the Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante National Monuments, spanning millions of acres in Utah. The two national monuments were among 27 that President Trump ordered Interior Secretary Zinke to review earlier this year. Now, to go back to the points of emphasis, opponents of this review said that the review was fake. All they were doing is feigning a review so they could take these two. This was what they started out to do, to shrink these two monuments, and the review was what it was, to kind of shield this political action. It says the NRA applauds the President Trump and Secretary Zinke. This is former ILA Executive Director Chris Cox. Decision to restore access to public lands in Utah. Under the Trump administration's decisions regarding national public lands are transparent and being made with the input of America's sportsmen and women. Hunters and sportsmen serve as the backbone of modern natural resource management in the United States. It's refreshing that the Trump administration values their input. It almost feels like Chris Cox is trolling us there. It feels like he's just being like, he's saying the opposite of what he's doing to troll us to see if we're noticing. So they to set up the other side, the motivation clearly here is to get hunters and anglers on board and to use the idea that we pay through excise taxes and license sales for the bulk of conservation work in this country, and use that power to say, like, these essential stakeholders are on board with this and we're doing this for them. And also at the same time saying the national monument designation is a problem for access for hunting and fishing.
Right.
And so here we are. That I want to let you kind of comment. And like I said, I will be very honest that I haven't kept up on what actually happened in the last year, but I know that there were some mining leases and things going up in both of these national monuments that I haven't checked on. So maybe we'll update this in the prologue.
Yeah, I'm not as up on this topic as I was a year ago either. So I would love to be able to say, here's what's going on, but I can't do that with any authority whatsoever. I think that I think that we are, and by we I mean hunters and anglers, we are a valuable demographic right now.
Yep.
And you saw that in the most recent Congress, right? Like the Great American Outdoors Act was, I think, an excellent example of representatives and political consciousnesses realizing we got to get this particular group on board. It's one of those few places we can sway people.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden we're valuable, and different sides, however you want to characterize that, different political persuasions are going to skin what they do differently in order to try and sway us to one side or the other. I think all of this circles right back to where we started, in that, like, you know what? I don't really want to hear the predetermined conclusion about why this is great or why it's terrible. I really want to hear how this is going to impact the public lands that I care about, in concrete, measurable terms.
Yeah, and when I announced on social media, or just be like, hey, I might vote for Trump. It was like 3 days before the election. I was like, right now, if I had to vote today, I'd vote for Trump. And it was a shitty 3 days for me trying to figure that out. But when I said that, a lot of people called me from both sides to discuss. And what happened was, when I gave my reasoning, I would hear two things. From people on the right, they would say, hey, our public lands aren't under attack as much as you think they are. It's not a problem. Because I was vacillating between gun rights and public land access, environmentalism, and things I care about for healthy ecosystems and healthy wild places, and the ability to defend my family and what that all means, and some of the nuances between the two things. So I'm thinking about those two things in my mind. I'm trying to weigh them out. And I heard pretty consistently from people I respect, your gun rights aren't under, you'll be able to keep your shotguns and rifles, for people on the left. And for people on the right, hey, your public lands are fine. Like, the trying to convince me that my fear should be elevated against one of these issues or another, right? And I think that, to me, that showed me a lot in just how people, when you lean one way, even if you lean very intellectually that way, I think you're predisposed to think that, your gun rights are fine. Access to those things are fine.
And in reality, maybe they're both not fine.
Yeah, that's
and then
probably,
what do you do?
That's what I said. I said, well, maybe they are not fine. And in my opinion, they aren't, because I can see, because I care about this stuff. I read about it. I think about it quite a lot. And I know that no matter where I vote, I'm putting something I value at risk. And that's the problem I have. And it's not to me, it's not the better of two evils or the lesser of two evils. It's how do I, it's not that. It's how do I weigh these very important things when I go and I make those decisions. And what we've just highlighted here is part of why we are unclear thinkers collectively. And part of why even our passions, even our pursuits, our enthusiast pursuits like hunting and fishing, land directly in the same muddy water as national politics. So yeah, now all we have to do is end on providing the solution. Go ahead, Miles.
I got it. It's all figured out. Here's what I'm going to say. And here's my issue with all sides of it. And I'm worried because I know what I'm going to sound like right now, but I'm going to say it anyway. As I said from the beginning, when you first started quoting the article, profit and sales. To me, I'm waiting for, and I don't see any evidence of it coming, but I'm waiting for the candidate that is not actually in the pocket of the huge, massive corporations and the very few billionaires on both sides of the political spectrum that are the ones pushing all these agendas. I will also admit I'm not a huge Bernie fan, just because he strikes me as the really obnoxious uncle at Thanksgiving that's always yelling at everybody, and I don't really like that guy. But I do agree with his perspectives of we have to find a way to strip the profit and the money out of our political system, or we don't have a path forward. And I in some ways that's true with our media system too. But as I said earlier, I don't like the alternative of it being a state-run media either. So I'm not on board with that shit. So I don't know how we move the profit game out of these very, very important pillars of democracy. But God damn, that's what I think we got to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the hunting and fishing conversation, one of the things I often say that when I look logically at hunting, I'm like, man, I'm glad the North American model of wildlife conservation exists, because at least we could start by a thought out foundation that has tenets and ways of acting and things that should educate us and dictate how we function. And then we can determine our sets of values and try to move around with that. So I'm always very comfortable with that. But I will say this, at the same time, I don't know of any, you can tell me, of any political shows or any shows that are discussing this kind of stuff other than advocacy groups or conservation groups that clearly have a stated goal, public land access, elk populations, turkey populations, fish population, whatever it might be, healthy habitats. These are lots of times single species conservation groups that are taking up the mantle of political discourse within the hunting and fishing space. There isn't a show about politics that talks through these things and tries to educate people in hunting at all. We have ceded the conversation to either outsiders or people that have clearly stated nonprofit goals in terms of conservation or wildlife, or both. So I'm not saying I know much about all of that. It's not all bad, but we certainly should try to break it down for ourselves more, because we don't have something dedicated to doing that.
And I don't know where it starts or what the incentive for it.
That's it.
is.
The incentive for it is like, that would be a tough job for anybody, and as you said earlier, we have this show. If everyone hated this show on both sides and it tried to remain firmly in the middle, which sometimes happens to this program, most companies would be like, that's not a good business model. Why don't you go with the hate incorporated business model? Because we live in a world where people actually actively hate hunting and try to stop it.
Yeah.
And so I could just come on here every week and go, here's the list of all the things you need to be worried about and be angry about and hate. Wouldn't be hard to do. But, when we do that, we often do that after we've heard from an anti-hunter or a vegan or something like that. So we can then say, like, here's what they said. Now here's what's happening on the, on the legislative side or policy side that is the manifestation of these feelings, right? They're trying to ban bear hunting in New Jersey to save the bears. Here's a guy who his ideologies lead to this legislation and the end of this hunt, et cetera, et cetera. So at least try to string it out in a way that just doesn't pander to people's hate of people that don't like what they do. If we can take one thing away from this, I certainly think that all of us can pick out when we're being pandered to, when the hate is being delivered in a weaponized way, in a very narrative way. Like when it happens, when some big political thing happens and hunting and fishing and the outdoors are involved, we should be able to look at it and suss out the real facts and pick out the bullshit pretty quickly if we train ourselves to really look hard at the presentations and the motivations of those outlets and conservation organizations and entities that have goals. Do we fix it?
Done. Follow the money.
Follow the money. All right, everybody. Well, hopefully, and we'll talk about what we're going to do in episodes going forward, but we're going to continue down this path, and the Taibbi paradox will be showing up in future episodes of this here.
Invite me back anytime, man. You know I love these conversations.
I love it too. I appreciate you in every way, and go listen to Bent. If you aren't already listening to Bent, you are a loser. And it's on you, really. So, all right, man, you have a good night, and we will talk to you real soon, brother.
Thanks, brother.
See ya. That's it. That's all. Another episode in the books. Thank you to our friend Miles Nolte. Is that right? And Miles Nolte.
Ben, I got called out this last week on the Bent podcast because I've been consistently pronouncing his name Miles Nolte, like with a little French accent over the E.
Ooh.
But
Miles
it's pronounced
Nolte.
Nolte, like Nick Nolte.
No, well, all
Which
the better.
makes sense.
Nick Nolte is the badass. So lots covered there, a lot of ground covered. Again, I think this is an important topic because I think it spans everything we do in life, and it really dictates how we talk to each other, how we exchange ideas, how we think about things. And I will freely admit that every podcast of this nature, every media thing, other than, as Phil brought up before we got in with Miles, other than things like the AP and some of this strict news reporting, everything has a value proposition. Everything has a thing that you listen for, right? I've listened to podcasts before that made it seem like masculinity was the only thing that mattered and it was under attack. I've listened to podcasts before that told you that religion was under attack, that your First Amendment rights were under attack, that your gender, that your race. I've listened to news broadcasts and all types of media that had told me that every aspect of my life is under attack, as we talked about with Miles. So thank you for listening to that whole thing. I wanted to examine that. I was inspired by Taibbi. If you want to go, there's no reason for me to be promoting him other than I really appreciate his ideas and his writings. So go see him. But we're going to next week and weeks after, because we have so many new hunters coming into this show and coming into our sport, our pursuits, talk a little bit more about guns, gun culture, what you need to know if you're a new gun owner. We did go over some of the NRA safety rules with Phil last week, but we're going to do that more with Ian Harrison, who's the editor-in-chief of Recoil Magazine, and then down the road, some other folks that have some diversion ideas from Ian. But first, Ian, next week on the Hunting Collective. Say bye, Phil.
Bye.
Too long, 'cause I can't go a week without doing wrong. Without doing wrong. Without doing wrong. Without doing wrong. Drinking in heaven.
As you know, the Meat Eater live tour is on April 23rd through May 5th. Chances are in a town near you. What you may not know is you can win tickets to each of these events just by going to a backcountry hunters and anglers pint night. There's going to be a pint night in each of these towns: San Diego, Salt Lake City, Tempe, Anaheim, Boise, Sacramento, Missoula, Portland, Tacoma, where you can compete in Meat Eater trivia and win not only tickets to the show, but a chance to be on stage with all of us. So get your butt to a pint night, and we'll see you on stage.